Hi, I'm Nick Bauer, and I will be reviewing the new Surface Duo 2 from Microsoft. My perspective here is as a Microsoft fan. I've owned most of the Surface Pro models as well as many of the flagship Lumia phones. I really appreciate the way Microsoft is driving innovation in the new device categories that open up new ways of interacting with technology. They aren't for everyone, and that's okay. So the questions we need to ask are both how good is this device at different tasks, as well as who would benefit from the unique capabilities it brings to the table. I purchased the 128GB Glacier model. While the name should have clued me in, on the website I thought it looked a lot more like the brushed metal of the Surface Pro line. However, it's much closer to white. The casing is also primarily glass and plastic, which was a little disappointing to me because I do love the metal finish on the Surface Pro, which to me feels much higher quality and has the advantage of not collecting fingerprints. My Duo 2 is already covered with smudges. The plastic and glass construction also leaves the appearance of seams at the edges, which is a bit distracting. I mean, it's relatively a minor issue, but a little bit disappointing on a device that's this expensive. It's also, my particular model has developed a creak when I press right here. I have requested that Microsoft process an exchange, and they're doing that right now. Holding the device, it feels solid. This is a dense piece of technology. Although it isn't particularly heavy, and the two halves by themselves are thinner than my Galaxy S20 Plus. And there are things I really love about this form factor. Modern phones have gone tall and narrow, like my Samsung Galaxy S20 Plus here. The advantage of that form factor is that you can use one hand to reach across the device. However, the trade-off is that you have to really stretch to reach the top of the device. I've actually injured my thumb from that motion. Another problem is that the device is somewhat precarious to hold. You have to choke way up to keep it from flopping over, while the keyboard remains at the bottom, which is a really awkward way to hold your thumb. Again, a way that you can get injuries. When Microsoft made the Surface Pro line, they found the 3:2 aspect ratio was ideal for flexible usage in any rotation, and they took that same approach to the Duo 2. While the device width means it is hard to use in one hand, the proportions of the device make it a lot easier to hold in one hand and manipulate with the other, or to hold and manipulate with both hands. When both screens are open, it's pretty natural to hold it like a book, and in the vertical reading orientation, I find I can hold it comfortably by one corner with the second screen at an angle. And this leads me into what I think is the best feature of the Duo 2. The multitasking features are great, but where I think it really shines, its killer feature, is in reading. If you ever need to read an article on the phone, the Duo 2 will feel absolutely liberating. Even if you're just using the one screen, the extra width makes for a much less constrictive reading experience. The Samsung Fold 3 really can't compete on that basis. Here I'll show you the same article on Ars Technica on both the Galaxy and the Duo 2. Now actually the same amount of text is available on each screen, but I much prefer the experience of seeing it on this one. But if the single screen experience is still too limiting, all you have to do is flip it open, slide the app up, and now you have a full mini tablet to read on, which is a very nice reading experience. Being able to read documents like this is so much nicer than reading on a phone. I will read on the phone, but it's so, you don't want to. You do it because you have to. It's the only way to do it, but it's a painful experience. And this device just frees me from that. Now, the Surface Duo 2's main competitor, the Samsung Z Fold 3, really can't compete on this basis. Now, the single screen experience of the Z Fold 3 is actually even narrower than the Samsung Galaxy S20. And the unfolded screen is actually only a little bit wider than one of the Duo 2 screens. These aren't quite like typical dual screens. The bar actually is occluding part of the screen. It's treating it as one big screen with a bar in the middle. And that's not necessarily a huge problem most of the time, but especially when you have a scrolling ability. Um, However, it does get a little distracting if you're just trying to read a page and you have to actually scroll to see around that bar. And this black bar is especially annoying when you're in an app that doesn't scroll. Here I'm looking at a PDF in Kindle, and it scrolls right and left, but I can't go up and down. So, seeing, unless I zoom in, so seeing what's occluded by that bar is really hard. And I wish that they had just decided to shift everything up and down so that everything is visible, even if it makes the document appear slightly skewed. Now let's talk about the physical experience of folding the device. This hinge is very tight and closes very smoothly. Now, some people might find the gap between the halves due to the camera bump annoying, but I don't really mind it. I actually find that the thickness makes for a better grip, which is actually a pretty good thing because this device is very slick otherwise. Um, I once sat down, screen down on a smooth, slightly tilted surface and actually started sliding off. So be careful of that. The camera bump was also designed to match the angle that the device sits when it comes down, which is a nice touch. Although there is actually a little bit of flex in the bottom corner here. I almost wish that they had extended the camera bump and then used that space to do something interesting. Definitely could use a little bit more battery, maybe an extra port, um, maybe they could put the wireless charging there, something like that would have been good. And that would no longer wobble as well when it's lying on a table. But these are minor details. The hinge also means the device can be stood up on its own in multiple orientations, which is a really useful feature. One thing I found myself doing is tenting it on my nightstand so it acts like an alarm clock in the morning. The only thing that would make it experience better is if I could tap the screen to see the time, or if the time would always show when plugged in. Sorry, I actually just noticed that you can peek to see the time, as well as see it on the glance bar here, which I find is okay, but you have to be at the right angle to see it really well. Though it's a nice use of that display space. I'm going to start moving into the software experience, and unfortunately there are a few problems there. But I'll talk about the good things first. The combined power button and fingerprint scanner works magically well, and the touch detection is tuned towards more deliberate touches to better distinguish what you intend. Because you might imagine, swinging the device around can lead to a lot of accidental touches, and you want to avoid that. But that can also lead to some frustration, as taps, especially at the edges, can need more deliberate, emphatic touching than you might be used to. When you open the hinge past 180 degrees, the device defaults to showing this right screen, but if you double tap the back, it'll switch displays. And if you had something displayed there that you really wanted to see, it will show that instead. So you can basically choose which screen you want to see if you're swinging it closed. Moving apps between screens is also extremely easy. I really love this interface they came up with. There's just a bar here, which is actually the home button. They turned it into a bar, but you just grab it, and you can move the window over. You can also drag into the middle, and you get the full screen experience. Now, by default, the Duo 2 uses a primarily gesture-based navigation with no system back or all apps view button. And I found this annoying because it was hard to discover those features, and I would often accidentally trigger the back navigation when swiping left, such as in a dating app, for example. I ended up turning it off in favor of the 3-button navigation mode, and then adds the back button and home button fit to each screen. Unfortunately, there are parts of the UI that feel just a bit unfinished, and sometimes apps don't work as well with either the wider screens or the dual screens. Apps that are optimized for tall, narrow screens with photos that expand the whole width often end up showing less information on a single screen. You have to scroll to see. Notice how this Instagram story is filling the width, but since it's designed for a taller screen, the top and bottom are being cut off. And notice here in TikTok, that this caption is cut off by the edge of the video. Clearly there's some offset bug. Hopefully apps will adjust to be fully compatible with these screen dimensions. There are also some issues with the dual screen experience at times. 1Password, for instance, sometimes seems to get confused about which screen it's supposed to be on and autofill on. And occasionally the device also gets confused during a rotation or something and the display renders really incorrectly. Although that can be undone by turning the display off and on again or trying to rotate it again. Also, Android has a new version that's going to be coming out sometime early next year, I believe, called 12L. And that's specifically geared towards foldable devices or dual screen devices like the Surface Duo 2. So hopefully that'll bring a lot of the improvements in. And if you're someone who loves taking handwritten notes, the Surface Duo 2 works great with the Slim Pen too. So you can use it as a mini notepad as well. And if you want, you can actually store the pen with the magnets right there. Although it's not particularly secure, so I'd highly recommend looking for a case that can hold the pen as well. As far as the camera goes, it's a respectable camera, but it's definitely not top of the line. And there are some issues with like the white balance that just don't quite seem right. And so if you're someone who really values the camera aspect of the phone, that's something you want to consider, maybe getting something that has a little bit more development behind it. So what's the bottom line here? So Microsoft has built a great device here in its second iteration. It has some flaws, but the vast majority of them are in software, and hopefully those can be fixed in future updates. If you're someone who reads a lot on the phone, you take notes regularly, or you want to do productivity tasks on the go, this device may be perfect for you even with the software issues. On the other hand, if you find you rarely want to read articles on your phone, you've never used the split screen function, and you don't typically jot down notes, and you already have a decent mini tablet, maybe this device isn't for you. So what am I going to do? Well, Microsoft has a generous extended return window through the end of January. So I'm going to take my time and keep putting it through its paces and maybe see what updates come in through then, which I'll be happy to update you on. The question before me isn't whether it's a useful device. It clearly is. The question is whether it's useful enough to me to be worth the very high price. And I will say it's leaning in that direction, as long as Microsoft can follow through. And we'll see about that. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.